In 2010, so how many voters are expected to cast their ballot Election Day? Michigan Secretary of State Terry Lynn Land estimates about 3.8 million people will go to polling places Tuesday. That's 52% of all registered voters in Michigan, about the same as the turnout for 2006 and the gubernatorial election then. 2 years ago, the turnout was 68%, but that was a presidential election, and those election years usually draw more voters.
Brian, every time there is an election, you hear about concerns involving voter fraud, possibly. One of the agencies watching out for this is the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we're joined live tonight in studio by U.S. Attorney Donald Davis. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, there is an election program that is in effect, and it's been operating for quite a while.
Yes. You mentioned that one of the agencies, there's 94 United States attorneys in the country. Each of those offices, for the time I've been there, which is over 35 years, each election we establish a district office election officer. In fact, I performed that service for 20 years. Don Daniels in our office, he's an assistant U.S. attorney, has done it since the mid-90s. And he is on call, he's at our office until the polls close on election night. And the phone number, I understand, is on your website. It's our office number, which is 616-456-2404. And after hours, you can reach Don at his private line, which is 616-808-2014. Don will take your calls and try to help anybody that learns of, has any concerns at the polling place and see if he can help them.
Let's talk more about that. I mean, what are some of the concerns that you've heard of in the past?
Well, you've got to keep in mind that primarily it's the state and the local jurisdictions that are responsible for elections.
Right.
The federal jurisdiction is pretty limited, but one key to our jurisdiction is when there's a federal candidate on the ballot. And every 2 years, there, of course, is a federal candidate because every everyone in Congress is running for office. Your lead-in was that we hear about voter fraud. You're right, we do. But frankly, we hear about it in the other districts. We don't hear about it in West Michigan. And I don't think it's anything in particular that the U.S. Attorney's Office has done. I think it's what the citizens have done. They also want fair, honest elections. They don't want people intimidated. They don't want people not being able to vote because of any racial bias or gender bias. And so we don't have any kind of tradition of election fraud. That's not to say that it couldn't happen, but we don't have that tradition. The kind of complaints we've gotten often are long lines. And I'd like to tell you that we can fix that. We can't do anything about it. The more people vote, the longer the lines are. We've also gotten complaints in the past where a person shows up at the polling place and their name isn't in the registration, and they haven't been able to vote. Clerk's offices have been very responsive in trying to arrange to get the person to the right polling place, to find out what's wrong. It could be simply the name is mixed up. The law changed a few years ago to allow people to vote provisionally, and that's really solved a lot of that problem.
What can you do with some of the complaints that you do receive?
Well, what we can't do is investigate right then. And you can kind of see why. The federal law prohibits the stationing of armed troops or armed officers at a polling place. So we can't send the FBI. We can't send the Grand Rapids Police, or we wouldn't ask them to go. You don't want armed people at the polling place. It's kind of an intimidating thing itself. You can see how that might be abused. Absent really extraordinary circumstances, we would investigate the allegation starting that night, but continuing the next day, like any criminal case, gathering evidence, gathering facts to see if a criminal case was warranted, if a civil case was warranted.
And then pursue it.
And pursue it like any other crime or civil violation.
Donald Davis, U.S. Attorney, thank you so much for joining us
tonight.
Thank you.
And
we appreciate it. We have that information on our website, too, at woodtv.com.